Imagine this, a warm Midwestern night in the summer of 1992. Springfield, Missouri, a quiet, tree-lined town where people still left their doors unlocked, where neighbors waved across lawns, and where the loudest sound on a June night was the hum of cicadas in the dark. It wasn't the kind of place that made headlines for horror stories. But that summer, Springfield became home to one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. 3 women, a mother and 2 recent graduates, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a house that looked lived in, yet frozen mid-moment. This case would come to be known as the mystery of the Springfield Three. On June 6, 1992, the air in Springfield buzzed with celebration. High school graduation, a rite of passage, a doorway to adulthood. 18-year-old Stacy McCall and her close friend, 19-year-old Suzie Streeter, had just graduated from Kickapoo High School. They were riding a wave of excitement, moving between parties, hugging classmates for what might be the last time, laughing about the future and the freedom that summer promised. Suzie was lively, outspoken, a girl who dreamed of becoming a hairdresser and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Stacy was softer-spoken, bright, the kind of friend everyone described as kind and dependable. That night they bounced between gatherings, one then another, until exhaustion set in. Their plan had been to stay at a hotel with classmates, a typical graduation tradition, but the hotels were booked solid. Instead, they decided to spend the night at Suzie's house. Waiting there was Suzie's mother, 47-year-old Sherrill Levitt, known to friends as responsible, hardworking, and deeply devoted to her daughter. Sherrill had worked long hours as a cosmetologist, saving what she could, and she was proud of her daughter's accomplishment. The trio, mother and 2 graduates, seemed the picture of normalcy. Ordinary people, ordinary plans. That's what makes what happened next so unthinkable. Witnesses later recalled seeing Suzie's red Ford Escort leaving one of the last graduation parties. At some point, in the early hours, Suzie, Stacy, and Sherrill ended up at the Levitt home, a modest, single-story house on East Delmar Street. By all accounts, they should have been safe. But the following morning would unravel into confusion, dread, and one of the largest investigations Missouri had ever seen. At 9 a.m., friends arrived at the Levitt home. Stacy was supposed to join them for a planned water park trip the next day. But when they knocked on the door, there was no answer. The front door was unlocked. That's strange, they thought, but Springfield wasn't the kind of place that people panicked over an unlocked door. Inside, what they found was unsettling. Purses belonging to Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy sat neatly on the floor of the living room, cash and cards still inside. Their cars were parked outside. Beds were unrumpled, suggesting no one had actually slept in them. In Suzie's room, the TV was paused mid-show, frozen in time. A makeup wipe lay damp on the countertop. On the floor, a small globe of glass from the porch light had been shattered. Someone had smashed it, and then the shards had been swept aside. The family dog, a little terrier named Cinnamon, wandered nervously in the house, unharmed, but clearly confused. There were no signs of forced entry. No screams had been heard during the night. It was as if the 3 women had simply evaporated. Here's where the tragedy deepens. Before police were even notified, multiple people, friends, neighbors, and concerned loved ones had already entered the house. They walked through rooms, picked up items, even tidied up. One person swept away the broken glass on the porch. Another checked the answering machine and heard a strange, garbled message, one that was later accidentally erased. Those critical first hours when a crime scene is most fragile were lost. Potential fingerprints, footprints, fibers, all likely destroyed in the chaos of well-meaning intrusion. By the time law enforcement arrived, the house was less a preserved scene than a lived-in space washed clean of clues. Detectives knew immediately they were at a disadvantage. What followed was one of the most exhaustive missing persons investigations Missouri had ever seen. Police received more than 5,000 tips in the months after the disappearance. Flyers with the women's faces were plastered on every telephone pole and bulletin board, Helicopters scanned the countryside, divers searched nearby lakes, volunteers canvassed highways for miles looking for anything out of place. Cadaver dogs reportedly hit on a site where fresh concrete had been poured. Later in the early 2000s, ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath a hospital parking garage. The shapes, investigators said, were consistent with the size and spacing of graves. But the garage had been built soon after the woman's disappearance, and tearing it up would have meant demolishing a structure used daily by hundreds of people. To this day, no excavation has been allowed. The supposed graves remain untested. Several men came under scrutiny in the early years. An ex-boyfriend of Suzie's, who'd had a rocky relationship with her, was interviewed. Stacy's older brother, who had brushes with the law, was looked at. Drifters in the area were questioned, but none of those leads held up under scrutiny. Then came darker figures. One man, a convicted felon with a violent record, reportedly told a reporter that he knew where the women were buried. Another notorious criminal, a man who had confessed to multiple kidnappings across the region, briefly claimed responsibility for the Springfield Three. But his confessions were riddled with inconsistencies, and he later recanted. In every high-profile case, there are people who step forward to claim knowledge they don't have. Sometimes it's for attention, sometimes to mislead, sometimes as part of a twisted game. Investigators had to sort truth from noise, and the noise was deafening. Over the decades, theories have multiplied. Some believe the women were targeted by someone they knew, someone who followed them home that night. Others think it was the work of a predator, an opportunistic killer who struck in the vulnerable moment between arriving home and locking the door. The smashed porch light is especially chilling. Did someone break it to create darkness, to conceal their approach? Or was it shattered in a struggle? There were reports of a suspicious van spotted near the Levitt home around that time. Witnesses later described it as a green Dodge. Could the women have been forced into it? If so, why was there no noise? No cry for help? Another theory circles back to the parking garage. Was the disappearance linked to a local construction project, with bodies hidden in plain sight under tons of concrete? Even now, many in Springfield believe the answer lies buried beneath that asphalt. And then there's the possibility of organized crime. Sherrill Levitt, as a salon worker, might have heard something, a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Could she have been silenced, with her daughter and Stacy becoming collateral damage? It's speculation, but in the absence of hard evidence, speculation fills the void. What's sometimes forgotten in the swirl of theories and true crime retellings is the raw human cost. Sherrill was a mother who worked hard to provide. Suzie and Stacy were teenagers just stepping into adulthood. Their families were shattered by the loss. In 1997, 5 years after the disappearance, the women were declared legally dead. It was a legal formality meant to provide closure, but it brought no answers. For their families, closure has never come. Candlelight vigils continued. Year after year, community members kept their memory alive with posters, with stories, with moments of silence. The house on East Delmar Street was eventually demolished. The site that had once been filled with laughter, graduation gowns strewn on furniture, and a dog waiting for its family was erased. All that remains is memory and questions that will not die. What makes the Springfield Three so haunting is not just the mystery of what happened, but the ordinariness of the night it began. 3 women went home to a house on a quiet street. They set down their purses, they wiped away makeup, they settled in for the night, and then they were gone. For 30 years, the case has been dissected by detectives, journalists, and armchair sleuths. Each time, the same fragments are turned over: the unlocked door, the purses, the smashed porch light, the van, the erased phone message, the anomalies under the parking garage. Each detail feels like it should unlock the puzzle, but together they remain pieces that refuse to fit. It's easy to imagine scenarios. Maybe it was a lone predator waiting for the perfect moment. Maybe it was someone they trusted, someone who walked through the front door without raising alarm. Maybe it was a larger conspiracy, hidden in plain sight. The truth could be simple. Or it could be something darker than we can imagine. And that's the haunting part. Somewhere out there, someone knows. Whether it's a killer still alive or someone who once overheard a confession, the answer to what happened to Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall exists. But until it's spoken, until it's proven, Springfield will carry this wound. After more than 30 years, the Springfield Three remain one of America's great unsolved mysteries, a story that refuses to fade. For the families, for the community, and for everyone who has ever heard the story, the question lingers, what happened that night? If you found this story haunting, like the video, subscribe for more unsolved cases, and share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think knows what really happened to the Springfield Three?